And she says, you know, it was your speech that caused me to just want to be this humanitarian and to start what she's got going on right here, the Doctors Without Borders here at USF. And that stuck with me. And so then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And I got off the phone with her, and I didn't expect that I would be still homeless to this day. Now, there are some things moving forward. I mean, I'm not on the street, I'm staying somewhere with family. But I thought that that would be solved, and it wasn't. And so, as time started getting closer for this event, you know, I've got all kinds of things going on, and it's getting closer, and I'm like, you know, I just don't know this is the right thing for me to do right now. Because what I have learned over the course of this past year is that many times I am operating out of fight or flight and don't even know it. And it took until this year for me to really realize and be able to recognize when I am in fight or flight mode, which then causes freeze sometimes. And so that's what was going on. So leading up to it, especially this week, because I had been in fight or flight, and so I froze, and so I'm waiting last minute to prepare for this event. And so there was a part of me that was like, I just can't do this. And then what kept just ringing in my mind was what Elaine said. And I knew that this was important. And just through, you know, some conversations and prayer and stuff, it was just like I was told, like, why are you stressed about having your table and all of these other things? I want you to go in there, and I want you to be raw, and I want you to be vulnerable, and I want you to share where you're at right now. Because this is the reality, not just for myself, but this is the reality for many other human trafficking survivors. And I'm sure for many other survivors in different arenas, but I'm speaking on human trafficking, what I know. And so we'll just give a quick timeline of this year. January did not start off for me with a Happy New Year. I was a victim of domestic violence in January, which landed me in jail as I was the victim. My face was completely bruised, my whole side of my face. It's still sore at times, but I was the victim, and I was taken into jail, so you can imagine how traumatic that was for me. As I said, I'm gonna get really raw and vulnerable with y'all. During that time, we were gonna open a house for women that, you know, it's an emergency response house, because again, when you have survived these types of things and you're in this movement, regardless of what area that is, we see the gaps, and as survivors, we want to go and fix them. And it's hard to understand that you can't fix everything. And so we knew there was a huge gap for housing for survivors of trafficking. Right now, I still believe there are less than 200 beds in the whole United States of America for women 18 plus who have identified as survivors of human trafficking. And that's a problem when they're saying it's the second largest crime, but I don't go by statistics, and I believe it's probably the #1 crime in the world, because it can be a hidden crime. So that was a problem, and so I dove into that, and I was going to get this house going. And in January, after that had happened, and the domestic violence situation, it was as if I was just, boom, put on this sabbatical. Like, okay, you're gonna reevaluate things, you're going to take a break. And I didn't realize that that break was gonna be a lot of this year. And during that time, I realized that desire for the house was a desire that I had. And you know, regardless of what you believe or who you believe in, for me it's God, Jesus. And so I was praying, and he's speaking to me, and he's like, I never told you to go get a house, Krista. You wanted to go get that house, and that's why you have no peace. And so I really came to a point to where I had to surrender that and just say, now, and plus, we had already been noticed by the Lightning Foundation as we were gonna have this house, so this was a very hard decision to make, to say, no, I have to call it quits on this house, because that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. And during that time, I also knew that there was going to be a shift happening, that I was going to be being led to a different area, because currently we were focusing on outreach, doing a whole lot of outreach. And during this time, I was also part of the National Human Trafficking Technical Training Assistance Program out of DC. And so I had began later in the year, doing a project with them. There were 6 survivors, and then there were 6 non-survivors, and we worked on an approach for prevention in 2 gen families for human trafficking. So there was a lot going on, and I remember sitting in there, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, I do outreach and stuff. Like, this kind of stuff is not my arena. But now I know why I was there, because the shift was happening. And so I was going through all of that. It was very hard for me to give up outreach, because I loved it, and I'm grieving it. And I'm like, wait, I don't want to give this up. But I knew that it was something that I was having to give up. And then through that, I had gotten married, and we were having issues. So I was like, well, we can work this out. Like, we'll go to counseling, whatever needs to happen. And so I had finally taken him back one more time. And I'm not saying anything bad towards him, but he's got his own trauma, and he's got his own stuff that he's been through. And so you have to be willing to work on that. And that is something that he wasn't ready to work on. So we had to part ways. So in September, I ended up, due to this situation, homeless. Not realizing that I was going to be homeless, and not realizing that it would be November 21st, and still kind of be without home. Even though I have some place to stay, I don't have my own space. And that's very important for survivors of anything, I think. Especially, that's where I recharge. That's where I find my peace. And so not having that has been a very hard thing. And so through my own experiences, it has caused me to really notice that there is a huge gap in services for those of us who are out. So yes, it's important to raise awareness. It's important to have programs and places for those coming out to go. But let me tell you, you've got survivor leaders, and you don't even have to be a leader in this movement, but a survivor, period. But you have got I'm just going to speak on survivor leaders right now, because I'm very connected with many survivor leaders in the United States. And what I am seeing is that many survivor leaders that are doing the work, we are boots on the ground, doing the hard work, and we are not thriving. We are barely surviving. And so coming into this, I just wanted to be very real and raw and tell you, I know that Grace talked about PTSD, and she talked about the different stages of trauma. Well, when you have one single trauma can change the brain, and it does change the brain. But when you have trauma that has started since childhood, and for 37 years I had trauma, and multiple traumas, I have got what you call complex PTSD, okay? There are many layers to that. And I thought I had it under control for quite some time. And I would tell people, oh, I'm just feeling discombobulated today. No, I wasn't discombobulated. That means you're disassociated, Krista. Like, you're just doing life while you're disassociated from yourself. And I think there was someone who spoke on forgetfulness. And I think there's also, with that forgetfulness comes disassociation. And so that is something that I've been going through personally. And what I have found during my journey is, because I've had health issues too. And what I have had some health issues on is some gastro issues. I believe it was October of last year I had to have a colonoscopy. And these issues that I had been having, I was having for quite some time, but it wasn't a big deal because I was still disassociated from my body. Even though I had been out of the life for quite some time, we're finding that sometimes it's 10 years, 20 years, 40 years later before survivors are saying, hey, I've got this medical issue or I've got this medical issue, because they have been so used to disassociating from their bodies that even long after they're out, they're still operating and doing life many times while very unattached from their bodies. And so I had this issue going on. I had a colonoscopy in October of last year. Because like my organization, we don't have enough for me to have health insurance. And I didn't have enough I couldn't qualify for Hillsborough County. It was just a mess. But I wasn't able to qualify for the free clinic, and so I was having a hard time trying to find where I was going to go and get some help. And I will say, amazing, Donna reached out and was like, let me know what the cost is and I will get it taken care of. But I did end up going to Moffitt and getting some help there. As far as my gastro issues, we do not know, still to this day, what the problem is. And I do not have health insurance. And so that's a problem. There is a gap where we are not able to see medical doctors that we need. So while we are sitting in here with a room of you that are interested in being a doctor or whatever the case may be, that's what you can do, is volunteer your time and do some pro bono work so that you will see survivors, because we have a myriad of health issues. And just to name a few, we tend to see survivors of human trafficking having a lot of gastro issues, having a lot of hip issues, having a lot of leg issues, stuff of that sort, just due to the trauma that our bodies have been through. So we definitely need people who are willing to step up and see us and help us, because when you've got complex PTSD, your health's not good, then that makes your complex PTSD start to spiral, which then again just makes your health even worse. So there is a huge gap here. And then the mental health aspect. We don't have anybody who is offering us support to get to trauma therapists. While I've been homeless, part of that was because I had found a very experienced trauma therapist that's $100 a session. And so I had to make a decision. Do you want to stay in your car, Krista? Or do you want to go and start taking care of what needs to be taken care of mentally? Because I knew that I was at a place I had never been, and I needed to go see that trauma therapist. So I made the decision to take money where I could have possibly had a hotel room for a week or whatever to go see a trauma therapist, because there were no resources for me to get into this trauma therapist. For my trauma, I can't just walk into any therapist. I need a very experienced trauma therapist, and that is a problem. We don't have enough therapists. We don't have enough organizations that are able to offer us resources to pay for therapy. It's just not there for us. So that's another place. I don't know if maybe your thing is psychology or something of that sort. We need therapists to step up. We need psychologists, psychiatrists. I mean, thankfully I'm able to see my psychiatrist because she sees me on pro bono. But we need people to step up in that area as well. I wanted to share with you a couple of, there are some survivor friends of mine, my sisters, and I have noticed some recently. It's kind of like when you're going through something and you know you're being led to another avenue, all of a sudden you start seeing these things. And so what I know that my transition is being led to is we'll still have Loving You Where You're At, that is working with those. We won't be doing as much outreach, but we will be working with those still who are still in the life, and we have built a lot of relationships over the years, and we still get a lot of phone calls and do mentoring. But we're also starting another branch called What About Us? And What About Us is simply what it says. What about us? What about the survivors who don't need a 12 to 24 month program? What about the survivors who have been out of the life for quite some time, and now we're having our stuff start coming up and there is no help for us? And so this is going to be where we are asking for people to support survivors and to help take us from surviving to thriving, because many of us are not thriving. We're taught, when we go to certain, all these different conferences, we're taught that, oh, you are more than a survivor and you are thriving. Yes, we are more than survivors. We are overcomers. But the reality is we are not thriving, many of us. I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak for a large number of survivor leaders who are not thriving. And so I wanted to just share a couple of things that just really stood out to me. And while I was thinking about this, I was like, man, I want to read this. So I'm not going to say names, but there is a survivor who is identifies as LGBTQ. That's another area where we need more help. The LGBTQ community are highly targeted for human trafficking. And there's just, we're starting to get more resources for them, but still, the resources are minimal. And this was just on November 3rd. Now, this particular survivor consults with organizations all over the United States, is great at the work that this person does. But this was this person's post. 3 years ago, I threw away my roping rope, the one I used to use in rodeos. It was a trigger and also something I kept in my closet just in case. Because not a fall goes by where I didn't think about hanging myself with it. I knew that was how I would go out of this world. I still think about it. I couldn't sleep last night at all. I wanted to go into my closet and pick it up, like I had so many times before. I don't regret throwing it away, but every fall I have many days I wish I still had it in there. No, I'm not okay. No, I'm not okay to try to take my life today. Or no, I'm not going to try and take my life today. But yes, I am thinking about that very robe. It was faded purple and white, and I loved the way it felt in my hands, like I had control over my life. The same person, on November 2nd, this is a very hard time of the year for this person. An amazing person doing great work in this community, and this is what I want y'all to really understand is we are people doing amazing work in this community, and there is no support for us, and that is not okay. Because we are the experts when it comes to this. And if we're not okay and you're losing us, then what are you going to do? So she also, this person made a post. I hate my life. I said it. Maybe if we all stopped pretending like everything was okay, we'd all be a little more okay with the mess of our lives. As my favorite poet says, Facebook is a lousy mortician desperately trying to make us all look more alive. But hey, I could be in jail like my brother, or in a shelter like I was 6 years ago, or in rehab like I was 9 years ago. Yay me. And then it says, I think we're all adults here, fucking up since 1989. And this is from that same survivor leader. And this person is a strong leader. That's not okay, because that's not thriving. And it's not okay that we don't have resources. I have another survivor who has been trying to find housing and trying to find support in different areas. And I also wanted to put this down. This person said, I have learned through this process that I must be my own best advocate. There is literally no one that will do that for me. Unless I go break the law, have been in touch with a local agency. I do not require emergency housing. I am a student and have been applying for disability to no avail. I live on a fixed income. Deposits are not a part of my budget. And then they went on to say, I am in complete disgust, was contacted by this local organization I reached out to asking for support like community and just mentorship, etc. Was just informed I needed to find stable housing before I was permitted in mentorship program. What population do these people think they are working with? My housing is pretty stable. I am just looking for a change. My boyfriend is another nationality than her, and that's frowned upon. And I'm also bisexual, which I have been discriminated against so many times. Worse yet, this organization is everywhere, and they have a revolving door policy for clients. Clients getting recruited, survivors being re-exploited. This is just these are just a few things. I don't have all day to be able to share the many more examples that I could, but this is what's happening. This is what's happening. There is a gap in services. So guess what? When we have a gap in services and there are no support for us, like I said, it's a revolving rabbit. Like it's like the rabbit wheel. The complex PTSD is spiked up, and then the health problems get worse, and then it feels like there's no end in sight for us. And then, you know, we do go to the hospitals or whatever, and it's sometimes like if our records are there and it shows anything about our past, I mean, it can be a trigger for us just to go to the hospital. Because we are looked down upon. God forbid we have anything on our record showing that we used to be addicted to pain medication, even though it's 15 years ago. They're still going to look at it and they're going to treat you like you're nothing but a junkie when you come in there for real problems. And that's not okay, because there are many things that I probably should go to a hospital for now. But when I do go, they act like I'm an inconvenience. This is not something we deal with here at the emergency room. You need to go see another doctor. Well, I don't have health insurance. And you know, it's just, it's very hard for us all around in the medical field. And I will say, yes, there are changes being made. There are trainings being provided to the doctors and the nurses and so on. I know on a national level, the Health and the Department of Children and Families, Health and Human Services, they are doing a lot of work, but there is a lot more work that needs to be done because we are suffering still and we are barely surviving. And I'm going to tell you, I didn't come out of 37 years of hell to only just survive for the rest of my life. At some point, I deserve to thrive, and so do the many other survivors, not only of human trafficking, but of any area, whether it be a refugee that's had to go through war, whatever the case may be, we deserve to thrive. And so like Elaine said, now she has this passion to be a humanitarian, and she's put this on, and so I'm asking each and every one of you that are here, you know, take in what was shared by all three of us. And as Grace said, like, remember, she's a survivor. Okay? And I don't think that it could have been worked out any more perfectly for you to share, and then for me just to be like, here I am without a presentation. I'm just going to get real and tell you what I am personally going through. And do you know how hard it is for me to sit here and share with y'all that I have been homeless since September? No, that's not easy. I run a nonprofit. We do a lot of work. I'm an author of a book. There is no reason that there should not be resources for myself and many others out there. It's just not acceptable, and something has to change. Am I time up? I don't know. Oh, who has time? Okay. And then there was a couple more things, because I do that. That's the fight or flight, your squirrel in your brain, but whatever. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, so I did, and then also dental work. You had brought that up. We have also, I'm not a big statistics person because I know y'all want to hear them, but when it comes to human trafficking, they are so far off, they're just not accurate. Okay? And so, but I will tell you that there is a statistic out there that as far as dental, only about 26.5% of survivors of human trafficking have reported that they've seen a dentist. So with that, I want to say I have another survivor friend, and this is another thing we did. Like in the midst of my fight or flight, they're trying to pass a full decriminalization law in DC. I have no home, and I'm heading to DC with another group of survivors to try and stop this bill from passing, because it would basically make human trafficking legal in the district. So yeah, but one of the friends, survivor friends who went with me, she says, you know, I hate to smile. She says, because every time I smile, she said, it reminds me of through, and everybody looks at me like I'm a junkie. Everybody deserves to be able to smile and not think that because they smile, they're going to be judged and thought of as a junkie, especially when all that she went through and many of us went through was not our choice. So we need dentists. We need people to stand up and say, this is not okay. I also wanted to, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to close this out with this. And this is myself speaking for, I'm speaking for myself and many other survivors. We don't want one more meeting, one more plan. We want action now. We need it and deserve it. We need everyone to be bold in whatever area you're in and move into action. And I thank you for your time and for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, all three of you for